The silver ship appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. It was not large, about the size of a building, and it moved slowly over major cities. People pointed at it from the streets. Some took pictures. Most went about their daily business. Ambassador Zethkalar watched the blue planet through his ship's windows. He had done this many times before with other worlds. Usually, the primitive species below would panic when they saw his ship. They would fire weapons at him or hide in underground shelters. Some would even worship his ship as a gift from their gods. But these humans seemed different. They watched his ship with interest, not fear. Their military planes followed him at a respectful distance but did not attack. Their leaders sent radio messages asking if he needed help or wanted to talk. This puzzled Zethkalar. In his 300 years as a Galactic Council ambassador, he had never seen such a calm reaction to first contact. He landed his ship on the large green area behind the White House in Washington. The humans had cleared the space for him and set up barriers to keep crowds away. They treated his arrival like a planned event, not an invasion. President Helen Carter waited for him at the bottom of his ship's ramp. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. Next to her stood Secretary of Defense Paul Martinez, a tall man with dark skin and a serious expression. Behind them were several other officials and a small group of soldiers. Zethkalar walked down the ramp slowly. He was tall and thin with pale blue skin and large black eyes. His people, the Veltar, were known throughout the galaxy as skilled diplomats. They rarely showed emotion and spoke in calm, measured tones. "Welcome to Earth," President Carter said, stepping forward with her hand extended. "I am Helen Carter, leader of the United States. We are honored by your visit." Zethkalar stared at her outstretched hand. Most species either bowed low or kept their distance when meeting him. This human wanted to touch him as an equal. He slowly reached out and shook her hand. "I am Ambassador Zethkalar of the Galactic Council," he said in perfect English. His translation device had learned their language from their broadcasts. "I come to evaluate your species for possible contact with galactic civilization." "We understand," Paul Martinez said. "We have prepared facilities for your stay and arranged meetings with our leaders, scientists, and military officials. Whatever you need to complete your evaluation, we will provide." Again, Zethkalar felt confused. Most species begged to join the galaxy or demanded proof of his authority. These humans simply accepted his presence and offered help. They walked toward the White House together. The building was old by human standards, but very young compared to galactic architecture. Zethkalar noted that it was not heavily fortified. Most species built their leadership centers like fortresses. Inside, they sat in a room called the Oval Office. Helen Carter offered him drinks and food, which he politely declined. His biology was different from theirs. "Tell us about this Galactic Council," she said, settling into her chair. "How many species are members? How does it work?" Zethkalar explained that the galaxy contained over 10,000 intelligent species. Most were members of the Council, which maintained peace and order. The Council decided which new species could join based on their development level and peaceful nature. "What happens to species that do not qualify?" Paul Martinez asked. "They are left alone until they develop further," Zethkalar replied. "Some are quarantined if they prove dangerous to themselves or others." Helen Carter nodded thoughtfully. "And what do you need to evaluate us?" "I must observe your society, technology, military capabilities, and cultural values," he said. "The process usually takes several weeks. Of course, Dr. Lisa Morgan will be your primary guide." Carter gestured to a woman in her 40s with red hair and intelligent eyes. "She is our leading expert on biology and has been preparing for this day for years." Dr. Morgan smiled at him. "I have so many questions about galactic biology and civilization. I hope we can learn from each other." Zethkalar found this attitude strange. Most species wanted to know about galactic technology and power. This human seemed more interested in knowledge for its own sake. General Chris Baker, a man with short gray hair and a firm handshake, joined them. "Ambassador, we have prepared a tour of our major cities and institutions. You can see our hospitals, schools, research centers, and yes, our military bases. We believe in transparency." "You would show me your military secrets?" Zethkalar asked. "We would show you what you need to see," Baker replied. "We have nothing to hide from potential galactic neighbors." This was unprecedented. Most species guarded their military capabilities carefully. These humans seemed confident, almost casual about revealing their defenses. Over the next few days, Dr. Morgan and General Baker showed him around Earth. He visited hospitals where humans dedicated their lives to healing others, even strangers. He saw schools where knowledge was shared freely with all children. He toured research facilities where humans pushed the boundaries of science and technology. The humans impressed him with their curiosity and cooperation. They worked together on problems that affected everyone. They had conflicts, yes, but they also had international organizations that tried to solve disputes peacefully. But something nagged at Zethkalar. These humans seemed almost too perfect, too peaceful. Every species had dark aspects to their nature. Where was humanity's darkness? On his 5th day on Earth, he decided to ask directly. General Baker, he said as they visited a medical research center, you have shown me much of human achievement, but I must ask about your military capabilities and history of conflict. The Council needs to understand how your species handles disagreements and threats. General Baker and Dr. Morgan exchanged a look that Zethkalar could not interpret. It lasted only a moment, but he sensed some kind of communication between them. Of course, Baker said slowly, that is an important part of your evaluation. Perhaps it would be best if you spoke with our historians and military analysts. They can provide a complete picture. We want to be thorough, Dr. Morgan added. Human history and our approach to conflict are complex topics. We want you to understand them fully. Helen Carter joined them for dinner that evening at the White House. The conversation was pleasant, covering art, music, and human culture. But as the evening ended, she became more serious. Ambassador, tomorrow you will begin learning about human conflict and military history. I want you to remember that everything you see represents our past and our efforts to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We have learned from our mistakes, but we have never forgotten the lessons they taught us. What kind of lessons? Zethkalar asked. President Carter looked directly into his eyes. Her expression was calm, but something in her gaze made him uncomfortable. That some things are worth fighting for, she said quietly, that freedom and justice are not gifts given by the strong to the weak. They are rights that must be defended, sometimes at great cost. That night, alone in his quarters, Zethkalar prepared his preliminary report. The humans seemed peaceful and advanced. They cooperated well and showed curiosity about the galaxy. They would likely make acceptable council members. But President Carter's words stayed with him. There had been something in her tone, something that suggested depths he had not yet seen. Tomorrow he would learn about human conflict. He expected to find the usual primitive warfare and tribal disputes. Every species had such a phase in their development. He had no idea what he was about to discover. Dr. Kevin Wright met Zethkalar at the Pentagon the next morning. Wright was an older man with white hair and calm eyes that seemed to have seen too much. He wore a simple suit and carried a tablet computer. Ambassador, I am a military historian, Wright said as they walked through the building's corridors. My job is to study human warfare and learn from it. Today I will show you our history of conflict. They entered a large room filled with screens and computers. Other humans worked quietly at desks, studying documents and data. Wright led Zethkalar to a comfortable chair in front of a large display screen. Before we begin, I should explain something, Wright said. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, but we do not fight the same way as most species. We have certain characteristics that make our conflicts different. What kind of characteristics? Zethkalar asked. You will see, Wright replied, touching his tablet. The screen came to life. The first images showed ancient human warriors. Zethkalar saw men with bronze weapons fighting much larger armies. Wright explained the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartan soldiers held off thousands of Persian warriors for 3 days. They knew they would die, Wright said calmly, but they fought anyway to give their people time to prepare defenses. This is typical human behavior in warfare. Zethkalar watched the recreation of the battle. The Spartans fought with incredible skill and determination. Even when wounded, they continued fighting. Even when surrounded, they did not surrender. Why did they not retreat? He asked. Because retreat would mean abandoning their duty, Wright explained. Spartans believed that returning home without victory or death in battle was shameful. They preferred to die fighting than live with dishonor. This confused Zethkalar. Most species fought to survive. They retreated when defeat was certain. They surrendered when continuing meant death. These humans seemed to have different priorities. Wright showed him more battles. Roman legions marching into barbarian territories knowing many would not return. Viking warriors sailing into storms to reach new lands. Medieval knights charging into impossible odds to protect peasants they had never met. Here is something more recent, Wright said, changing the display. The screen showed a frozen city covered in rubble. Snow fell on destroyed buildings and dead bodies. Human soldiers moved through the ruins, fighting from house to house. This is Stalingrad during World War II, Wright explained. German forces tried to capture the city. Soviet forces defended it. The battle lasted 5 months in winter conditions that killed many soldiers before the fighting even began. Zethkalar watched footage of the battle. Humans fought in buildings with no roofs, in sewers filled with ice water, in ruins where every room could be a death trap. They continued fighting even when they ran out of ammunition, using knives and bare hands. The average life expectancy of a Soviet soldier in Stalingrad was 1 day, Wright continued. New soldiers arrived, fought, and died within hours. But they kept coming. They never stopped defending their city. Why? Zethkalar asked. The city was already destroyed. What were they defending? The idea of the city, Wright said. The principle that invaders could not take what was not theirs. Every building, every room, every pile of rubble became a symbol worth dying for. Wright showed him the D-Day landings. Thousands of human soldiers jumping from aircraft into enemy fire, knowing most would die before reaching the ground. Ships full of men sailing toward beaches covered with machine guns and explosives. They volunteered for this, Wright said as Zethkalar watched young men running into certain death. Every one of these soldiers knew the odds. They came anyway. The screen showed a medic running across a battlefield under heavy fire to reach wounded soldiers. He saved 3 men before enemy bullets killed him. Why did he not stay in safety? Zethkalar asked. Because other humans needed help, Wright replied. We have a saying, leave no one behind. It means we do not abandon each other even when helping means dying. Captain Amy Rodriguez joined them after lunch. She was a young woman with short black hair and the bearing of a professional soldier. She showed Zethkalar modern military training footage. This is how we prepare our current soldiers, she said, starting a new video. Zethkalar watched humans enduring training that would kill most galactic species. They ran for miles carrying heavy equipment. They fought in simulated battles for days without sleep. They practiced jumping out of aircraft, swimming in freezing water, and surviving in hostile environments. Why do they volunteer for this suffering? He asked. Because when real combat comes, they need to be ready to protect others, Rodriguez answered. Every skill they learn, every hardship they endure in training might save lives later. The screen showed a soldier throwing himself on an explosive device to shield his teammates from the blast. Another soldier carried a wounded enemy to safety under fire. A pilot deliberately crashed his damaged aircraft into empty ground instead of ejecting, saving the town below but killing himself. These are not unusual events, Rodriguez said. This is normal human military behavior. We are taught that the mission comes first, our teammates come second, and our own lives come last. Dr. Nancy Scott arrived in the evening. She was a military psychologist, a thin woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. But her words disturbed Zethkalar more than the battle footage. Ambassador, you have seen what humans do in war, she said. Now let me explain why we do it. She showed him studies of human psychology under stress. Humans, she explained, had certain mental characteristics that made them different from other species. We have something called fighting spirit, she said. It means we become more determined when facing greater odds. Most species become more cautious when threatened. Humans become more aggressive. That seems illogical, Zethkalar said. Perhaps, but it has kept our species alive through ice ages, plagues, and disasters that would have destroyed others. When faced with extinction, we do not lie down and die. We fight harder. She showed him interviews with human soldiers. They spoke calmly about impossible missions and terrible losses. They talked about fear, but also about duty and honor and protecting those who could not protect themselves. We have concepts that might seem strange to galactic civilization, Dr. Scott continued. We believe that some things are worth dying for. Freedom, justice, the safety of innocence, the right to choose our own path. But if you die, you cannot enjoy these things, Zethkalar pointed out. No, but others can, she replied. We fight not just for ourselves, but for future generations. For people we will never meet. For principles that will outlive us. She showed him something that chilled him to his core, human entertainment that glorified warfare and sacrifice. Movies about soldiers dying heroically. Songs about fighting impossible odds. Books where the heroes always faced greater enemies and never surrendered. You create art about dying in battle? He asked. We create art about the reasons for fighting, she corrected. About courage and sacrifice and protecting what matters. These stories teach our children what we value most. Dr. Scott pulled up a simple quote on the screen. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. This is a core human belief, she said. We cannot ignore injustice or oppression even when it does not affect us directly. If we see someone being hurt, we feel obligated to help regardless of the cost. As the day ended, Zethkalar sat alone in his quarters, trying to process what he had learned. These humans did not fight like any species he knew. They did not fight for territory or resources or survival. They fought for ideas. They created military forces not to conquer others, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. They trained their soldiers to die for strangers. They celebrated warriors who sacrificed everything for principles. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to genuinely believe that some things were more important than life itself. Zethkalar had evaluated dozens of species for the Galactic Council. He had seen warriors and conquerors and peaceful farmers, but he had never seen anything like this. These humans did not just fight when cornered. They actively sought out injustice and oppression to oppose. They made it their responsibility to defend others even at the cost of their own lives. What would happen, he wondered, if such a species encountered the darker aspects of galactic civilization? What would they do if they discovered the Council's more questionable policies? The thought kept him awake long into the night. Commander Jake Stevens picked up Zethkalar early the next morning. Stevens was a man in his 30s with steady hands and alert eyes that missed nothing. He wore a simple uniform without decoration, but he carried himself like someone accustomed to danger. Today you will see how modern humans handle conflict, Stevens said as they drove toward an airfield. We have operations happening around the world right now. Some are peacekeeping missions, others are disaster relief. All of them show how we use military force in the current era. They boarded a military aircraft that flew them to a base in another country. During the flight, Stevens explained their destination. There is a civil war happening here, he said, showing Zethkalar maps on a tablet. Two groups are fighting for control. Civilians are caught in the middle. Our job is to protect refugee camps and help people escape the violence. Which side do you support? Zethkalar asked. Neither, Stevens replied. We support the people who just want to live in peace. We help anyone who needs help regardless of which side they belong to. This confused the ambassador. Most species chose sides in conflicts based on advantage or alliance. These humans seemed to choose based on who needed protection most. They landed at a forward operating base near the conflict zone. The base was small and temporary, surrounded by barriers and guard posts. But Zethkalar noticed something strange. The humans working there seemed relaxed, almost casual, despite being in a war zone. Sergeant Maria Lopez met them at the landing pad. She was a compact woman with dark hair and scars on her hands that spoke of experience in dangerous places. Ambassador, welcome to Camp Liberty, she said, shaking his hand firmly. We have a mission starting in an hour. Commander Stevens thought you might want to observe. She led them to a briefing room where a dozen soldiers prepared for their mission. They checked weapons and equipment with professional efficiency, but they also joked with each other and shared photos of their families. We are extracting civilians from a village that got caught between the two armies, Lopez explained, pointing to a map. Intelligence says there are about 50 people trapped in a school building. Both armies are using the area for combat operations. How will you avoid fighting both sides? Zethkalar asked. We won't fight unless they attack civilians, Lopez said. Our rules of engagement are clear. We protect innocent people. We only shoot at people who threaten innocence. What if both armies order you to leave? Lopez smiled grimly. Then we explain that we will leave as soon as every civilian is safe. If they try to stop us from helping innocent people, then they become the enemy. Zethkalar watched the mission preparation with growing amazement. These soldiers were preparing to enter an active battle zone not to fight, but to rescue people they had never met. People who were not even their own species' allies. The mission began with helicopters flying low over hostile territory. Zethkalar rode in the command aircraft, watching through monitors as Lopez and her team approached the trapped village. Enemy soldiers fired at the helicopters as they landed. The humans responded by taking defensive positions around the school building, protecting the civilians inside while medics helped the wounded. Red Team. This is Blue Leader. Lopez's voice came through the radio. We have civilians in need of medical attention. Request immediate evacuation for the wounded. Copy, Blue Leader, came the response. Medical evac inbound. Hold your position. Zethkalar watched in disbelief as the humans maintained their protective perimeter under enemy fire. They could have abandoned the civilians and retreated to safety. Instead, they remained in danger to help strangers. Medic Danny Clark ran between the wounded civilians, treating injuries without regard for his own safety. Enemy bullets hit the ground around him, but he continued working. Why does he not seek cover? Zethkalar asked Stevens. Because people are hurt, Stevens replied as if it were obvious. Danny is a medic. His job is to help injured people, not to hide from danger. During the evacuation, something happened that shook Zethkalar to his core. Enemy soldiers began advancing on the school, threatening the civilians inside. Lopez and her team found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. Blue Leader, you are ordered to withdraw, came the command from base. Do not engage superior forces. Lopez looked at the civilians huddled in the school, then at her small team of soldiers. Negative, Command, she replied calmly. We have 50 civilians who will die if we leave. We are staying. Sergeant, that is an order, the commander's voice said firmly. Understood, sir, Lopez said. Court-martial me later. Right now, these people need protection. She turned off her radio and prepared to fight an impossible battle. Zethkalar watched in shock as the human soldiers deliberately disobeyed orders to protect strangers. They chose probable death over abandoning innocents. This was not strategy or tactics. This was something else entirely. Fortunately, reinforcements arrived before the battle began, but the incident revealed something about human nature that disturbed the ambassador deeply. Back at the base, he spoke with Dr. Sharon Bell, a trauma specialist who worked with both soldiers and civilians. Doctor, I observed something today that I do not understand, he said. Your soldiers were willing to die for people they had never met. They disobeyed orders to help strangers. This seems irrational. Dr. Bell smiled sadly. Ambassador, let me tell you about human psychology. We have what we call empathy. It means we feel pain when we see others suffer. We cannot simply walk away from people who need help. She showed him studies of human brain activity. When humans saw others in pain, their own brains activated as if they were experiencing the pain themselves. We are biologically programmed to help each other, she explained. It is not a choice or a strategy. It is part of what makes us human. But this makes you vulnerable, Zethkalar said. Enemies could exploit this weakness. Perhaps, Dr. Bell agreed. But it also makes us stronger in ways that are hard to measure. Humans will endure incredible hardship to help their friends. We will sacrifice our own interests for our families. We will die for strangers if it means protecting innocents. She showed him footage of human disaster relief operations. Humans flying into hurricanes to rescue trapped people. Humans entering collapsed buildings to search for survivors. Humans working for days without sleep to help earthquake victims. We have survived as a species not because we are the strongest or the smartest, she said. We survive because we help each other. Because we never abandon our wounded. Because we share resources with those who need them. That evening, Stevens took him to observe a training exercise unlike anything Zethkalar had ever seen. Human soldiers were practicing combat in zero gravity, using equipment that simulated space warfare. We call these Space Marines, Stevens explained as they watched humans maneuvering in 3 dimensions with jetpacks and magnetic boots. They train to fight in the environment where most galactic species feel most comfortable. Zethkalar watched in growing horror as humans adapted to zero-gravity combat with disturbing ease. They used the 3-dimensional battlefield to their advantage, moving in ways that would confuse most galactic species. You have been preparing to fight in space? He asked. We have been preparing to defend ourselves wherever necessary, Stevens replied. Space underwater in extreme cold and desert heat. Humans can adapt to almost any environment. Colonel Rita Hayes joined them as the exercise ended. She was an older woman with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had commanded soldiers in real combat. Ambassador, we understand that your people live primarily in space, she said. We want you to know that we respect your environment. But we also want you to understand that space will not protect anyone who threatens Earth or human colonies. Human colonies? Zethkalar asked. We have been exploring space for decades, Hayes explained. We have bases on the Moon and Mars. We are planning missions to other star systems. Humans do not stay in one place for long. She showed him plans for human space exploration, ships designed for long voyages, habitats that could support human colonies on distant worlds, weapons systems that could function in the vacuum of space. "We are not a planet-bound species," Hayes continued. "We go wherever we can survive. And we bring our values with us. Protection of innocence, defense of the weak, opposition to oppression." "What if galactic law forbids human expansion?" Zethkalar asked. Hayes looked at him with calm, steady eyes. "Ambassador, we believe that sentient beings have the right to choose their own destiny. We believe that freedom and justice are not gifts to be granted by authorities. They are rights that belong to everyone. Even if galactic civilization disagrees, especially then," Hayes replied quietly. As the day ended, Zethkalar realized that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. They were not a primitive species seeking galactic approval. They were a mature civilization with their own values and their own agenda. They had been preparing for contact with galactic civilization for years. Not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as equals ready to defend their principles. Worse, they had been preparing for the possibility that galactic civilization might not share their values. They had weapons, tactics, and the will to fight for what they believed was right. Most terrifying of all, they seemed to view opposition to injustice as a moral obligation. Admiral Frank Nelson met Zethkalar at a secure facility outside Washington. Nelson was an older man with white hair and eyes that seemed to hold decades of secrets. His handshake was firm, but his smile was careful. "Ambassador, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels," Nelson said as they walked through multiple security checkpoints. "We are sharing this information because we believe in honest communication with potential galactic neighbors." They entered an underground complex filled with laboratories and research facilities. Scientists and engineers worked on projects that made Zethkalar's blood run cold. Dr. Peter Kane, a physicist with wild gray hair and excited eyes, showed him the first project. "This is our faster-than-light communication system," Kane said, gesturing to a complex array of equipment. "We developed it by studying theoretical physics and quantum mechanics. We have been sending messages to nearby star systems for 5 years. You developed FTL communication without galactic assistance?" Zethkalar asked, his voice barely steady. "We had no choice," Kane replied cheerfully. "We knew other species must exist, so we figured out how to talk to them. It took us 30 years, but we did it." Zethkalar stared at the equipment. FTL communication was advanced galactic technology. Most species needed centuries of council guidance to develop it. These humans had done it alone, through pure determination and scientific method. Kane showed him other projects that defied belief. Weapons that could disable ships in space, shields that could protect against energy attacks, engines that could move ships faster than anything in the current galactic fleet. "How is this possible?" Zethkalar asked. "Humans are very good at solving problems," Kane said simply. "When we encounter something we do not understand, we study it until we figure it out. When we need something that does not exist, we invent it." Admiral Nelson led him deeper into the facility. "Ambassador, we have been reverse engineering alien technology for decades. Not from crashed ships or captured equipment, but from theoretical possibilities and mathematical models." They entered a room where engineers worked on spacecraft designs unlike anything in galactic civilization. The ships were built for war, but also for exploration and rescue operations. "We assume that any species capable of interstellar travel might also be capable of interstellar warfare," Nelson explained. "We prefer peace, but we prepare for all possibilities." Agent Carol Stone joined them in the next section. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to secrets. She led them to a library filled with books, computers, and data storage devices. "Ambassador, I want to show you something that might explain human psychology," she said, pulling up files on a computer screen. "These are examples of human fiction, stories we tell ourselves about the future." Zethkalar read with growing horror. Humans had written thousands of stories about meeting alien civilizations. Some stories described peaceful contact and mutual cooperation, but many others described very different scenarios. Stories where humans fought galactic empires and won. Stories where humans liberated oppressed alien species. Stories where humans refused to submit to superior forces and instead found ways to defeat them. "These are just entertainment," Stone said casually, "but they reveal how humans think about challenges and conflicts. We imagine ourselves facing impossible odds and finding ways to win. She showed him military fiction where human soldiers fought alien invaders, science fiction where human explorers spread across the galaxy, bringing freedom and democracy to enslaved worlds, horror stories where humans were the monsters that other species feared. You write stories where your species conquers the galaxy? Sethkalar asked. We write stories where our species fights for what we believe is right, Stone corrected. Sometimes that means conquest. Sometimes it means liberation. Sometimes it means revolution. Dr. Greg Martin, a philosophy professor with kind eyes and a gentle voice, joined their discussion, but his words were anything but gentle. Ambassador, let me explain core human philosophical concepts, Martin said, settling into a chair. We believe in individual rights. We believe that every sentient being has the right to choose their own destiny. We believe that authority must be earned, not imposed. What if galactic civilization disagrees with these beliefs? Martin smiled sadly. Then galactic civilization would become our enemy. Not because we want conflict, but because we cannot accept oppression. It goes against everything we are as a species. He showed Sethkalar human philosophical works, documents that described concepts like natural rights, self-determination, and justified revolution. Ideas that would terrify any established galactic authority. We have a concept called mutually assured destruction, Martin continued. It means that if you try to destroy us, we will destroy you too, even if we die in the process. We would rather face extinction than live as slaves. That is madness, Sethkalar said. Perhaps, Martin agreed. But it is human madness. We have used this principle to prevent wars on our own planet. The threat of total destruction keeps everyone honest. Agent Stone pulled up more files. Ambassador, we have been studying galactic civilization through your broadcasts and transmissions for years. We know about the Council. We know about the member species. We know about the non-member species too. She showed him intelligence reports that made Sethkalar's hearts race. Humans had identified dozens of galactic species. They had analyzed Council policies and procedures. They had even located several Council facilities and military bases. How did you gather this information? He asked. We are very good at watching and listening, Stone replied. We have been intercepting galactic communications for decades. We know more about your civilization than you realize. She pulled up a particularly disturbing file. We know about the Kextar incident. We know about the forced relocations. We know about the species that were quarantined for asking too many questions. Sethkalar went cold. The Kextar incident was classified information. The forced relocations were state secrets. How could these humans know about Council operations that were hidden from most member species? We also know about the tributary system, Stone continued relentlessly. How smaller species are forced to provide resources to larger ones. How the Council maintains order through fear and economic pressure. How dissent is handled. Dr. Martin leaned forward. Ambassador, we want you to understand something very important. If galactic civilization operates through oppression and coercion, then we have a fundamental problem. What kind of problem? The kind that ends in revolution, Martin said quietly. Humans cannot ignore injustice. We cannot walk away from oppression. If we encounter a system that enslaves or exploits other species, we will work to change that system, even if it means war with the entire galaxy. Especially then, Stone said. We would rather fight for justice and lose than live comfortably while others suffer. Admiral Nelson showed him the final revelation. Deep in the facility's most secure section, human engineers were building weapons designed specifically for fighting galactic technology. We call this Project Liberty, Nelson said, showing him plans for ships, weapons, and tactics designed to challenge Council forces. We hope we never need to use any of this. But if galactic civilization threatens human freedom or oppresses other species, we will be ready. The weapons were terrifying in their simplicity and effectiveness. Humans had identified weaknesses in galactic technology and designed counters for every advantage the Council possessed. You have been preparing for war with us? Sethkalar asked. We have been preparing to defend ourselves and others, Nelson corrected. We hope for peace and cooperation. But we know that not all species share our values. We know that power sometimes corrupts even well-intentioned governments. Dr. Kane rejoined them with the most disturbing revelation of all. Ambassador, we have developed technology that could theoretically challenge the Council's most advanced systems. Our computer networks could disrupt galactic communications. Our weapons could damage Council ships. Our tactics could neutralize galactic advantages. Why are you telling me this? Because we believe in honest communication, Kane said simply. We want the Council to understand that humans are not helpless primitives seeking protection. We are a mature species with our own capabilities and our own agenda. As the day ended, Zeth Kalar realized that everything the Council believed about primitive species was wrong, at least regarding humans. These were not simple farmers or warriors seeking galactic guidance. They were an advanced civilization that had been studying galactic society for decades. They had developed technology that rivaled Council capabilities. They had gathered intelligence that revealed Council secrets. They had prepared for every possible scenario, including war with superior forces. Most terrifying of all, they seemed to view themselves as guardians of justice and freedom. They would not simply join galactic civilization as another member species. They would work to change it, to reform it, to revolution it if necessary. They were not seeking galactic approval. They were evaluating galactic civilization to determine if it met their moral standards. And from their questions and preparations, Zethkuller suspected they had already reached a disturbing conclusion. The galaxy was not ready for humanity. But more importantly, humanity. Zethkuller sat alone in his ship, staring at the blank report form on his computer screen. 3 weeks on Earth had ended, but he could not bring himself to write what he had learned. His hands shook as he tried to find words that could explain the horror he had discovered. He started several times, deleting each attempt. How could he tell the Galactic Council that they had found a species that could destroy everything they had built? How could he explain that these peaceful-looking humans were the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever encountered? Not because they were violent, because they were righteous. He began recording personal logs instead, trying to make sense of what he had witnessed. Personal log, day 21. I have completed my evaluation of the human species. I cannot recommend them for Council membership. I cannot recommend contact of any kind. But I also fear that my recommendations may not matter. He paused the recording and walked to his ship's window. Below, he could see humans going about their daily lives. Children playing in parks. Adults working in offices. Elderly people feeding birds by a lake. They looked so normal, so harmless. But Zethkuller now knew the truth beneath their peaceful surface. Personal log continued. Humans are not like other species. They do not fight for survival or territory or resources. They fight for ideas. They have concepts of right and wrong that override their instinct for self-preservation. He remembered watching Sergeant Lopez choose possible death over abandoning civilians. He remembered Dr. Martin calmly discussing revolution against galactic authority. He remembered the weapons designed specifically to fight Council forces. They cannot be controlled through fear, because they value principles more than life. They cannot be controlled through economic pressure, because they will share resources with those who need them. They cannot be controlled through superior force because they view resistance to oppression as a moral duty. On his final day, he had requested one last meeting with President Carter and her advisors. They met in the same Oval Office where his evaluation had begun, but everything felt different now. Dr. Amanda Price, the Secretary of Education, had joined them. She was a woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and a teacher's patient manner, but her questions revealed the depth of human preparation for galactic contact. Ambassador, we have enjoyed learning about galactic civilization, President Carter said as they settled into their chairs. We hope this has been educational for you as well. It has been very educational, Zethkuller replied carefully. We are curious about something, Dr. Price said, leaning forward. In our studies of galactic communications, we have noticed references to species that chose not to join the Council. What happens to them? The question chilled Zethkuller. These humans had been studying Council policies more carefully than he had realized. Some species prefer independence, he said. The Council respects their choice. All of them? Carter asked quietly. Most of them, Zethkuller corrected, immediately regretting his honesty. The humans exchanged glances. In that brief moment of eye contact, Zethkuller sensed volumes of communication he could not understand. What about species that actively oppose Council policies? Dr. Price asked. Species that try to interfere with Council operations or liberate other species from Council control? The Council maintains order for the benefit of all, Zethkuller said, using the standard diplomatic response. That was not the question, Carter said gently but firmly.
What happens to species that actively resist council authority?
Zethkalar realized he was trapped. These humans already knew the answer. They were testing his honesty, not seeking information. Such species are usually quarantined, he admitted. For the safety of galactic civilization. I see, Carter said. Her tone remained calm, but something in her eyes hardened. And what does quarantine involve? Economic isolation, communication restrictions, sometimes military blockade. Until they submit to council authority? Until they no longer pose a threat to galactic order. Dr. Price nodded slowly. Ambassador, we appreciate your honesty. Now let us be honest with you. She gestured to an aide who brought in a tablet computer. The screen showed detailed intelligence reports about council operations that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. We know about the tributary system, Price said calmly. We know how the council uses economic pressure to control member species. We know about the forced relocations, the cultural suppression programs, and the fate of species that ask too many questions. We also know about current resistance movements, Carter added. The Zephyrian Independence Cells, the Arcturus Liberation Front, the vegan free colonies that the Council pretends do not exist. Zethkalar stared at them in shock. This information was classified beyond his clearance level. How could primitive humans have access to intelligence that most Council members did not know existed? How? He whispered. We are very good at gathering information, Dr. Price said. More importantly, we are very good at helping people who need help. Carter leaned forward. Ambassador, we need you to understand something about humanity. We believe that all sentient beings have the right to determine their own destiny. We believe that freedom is not a privilege granted by authority, but a fundamental right that belongs to everyone. If we discover that galactic civilization operates through oppression and fear, Dr. Price continued, then we cannot simply ignore that knowledge. We cannot join a system that enslaves other species, even if joining would benefit us. What are you saying? Zethkalar asked, though he feared he already knew. We are saying that humanity will not accept galactic oppression, Carter replied. Not for ourselves and not for others. If the Council maintains order through fear and coercion, then the Council has made itself our enemy. You would fight the entire galaxy? We would fight for justice and freedom regardless of the odds, Dr. Price said. We have been preparing for that possibility since we first detected galactic transmissions. Carter stood and walked to the window. Ambassador, we hope it will not come to conflict. We hope that galactic civilization can be reformed from within, through peaceful means. But we want the Council to understand that humanity will not remain silent while other species suffer. You are threatening the Council? We are explaining our position, Carter corrected. We cannot and will not ignore oppression. We will help any species that wants freedom, whether the Council approves or not. Dr. Price showed him more files, plans for contacting resistance movements, technology transfers to oppressed species, support networks for galactic refugees. We are already helping, she said quietly. We have been in contact with several independence movements for years. We have been providing them with technology, intelligence, and strategic support. That is an act of war against the Council, Zethkalar said. That is an act of justice against oppression, Carter replied. We will not apologize for helping people who need help. As the meeting ended, Zethkalar understood the true scope of the disaster he had uncovered. Humans were not seeking Council approval. They had already decided that the Council was morally unacceptable. They were not planning to join galactic civilization. They were planning to change it by force if necessary. They had weapons that could challenge Council technology. They had intelligence networks that penetrated Council security. They had allies among resistance movements across the galaxy. Most terrifying of all, they had the will to use everything they had built. Personal log, final entry, he recorded that night. I must recommend immediate quarantine of the Sol system. Mark it as a restricted zone. Under no circumstances should any Council ship approach Earth again. He paused, looking out at the stars where he knew human ships were already exploring. But I fear it is too late. Humans know about galactic civilization now. They know about our technology, our weaknesses, our secrets. They know about the oppressed species we have failed to help. He thought about everything he had seen. Human soldiers dying for strangers. Human scientists sharing knowledge freely. Human leaders choosing principles over power. They are coming. Not as conquerors seeking dominance, but as liberators seeking justice. They will not stop until every sentient being in the galaxy has the freedom to choose their own path. The irony was bitter. The Council had sent him to evaluate humanity for membership. Instead, humanity had evaluated the Council and found it wanting. The galaxy will never be the same. Humans do not accept the status quo. They do not bow to authority. They do not ignore injustice. They change things no matter what the cost. As his ship prepared to depart Earth, Zeth Kalar knew that his report would terrify the Council. But he also knew it would not stop what was coming. Humanity had seen the stars. They had learned about galactic civilization. They had made their choice. They were not coming to join the galaxy as it was. They were coming to remake it as it should be. And knowing humans, they would probably succeed. The ambassador's ship lifted off from Earth, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. But far below, in hidden facilities and secret laboratories, humans continued their preparations. They had work to do. People to free, a galaxy to save from itself, and they were just getting started.